There was a pair of white shoes once that I almost bought, and then didn't. I can still see them. They were on a shelf at about eye level, set slightly apart from the others, the way some shops set a thing a little on its own. Patent leather, very glossy, with a thin strap across the top. The kind of white that isn't quite white, a little warmer than that, a little softer. And under the shop lights they had this faint sheen that moved when you tilted your head, like the surface of something wet. I picked one up. I remember the weight of it, lighter than it looked. I held it for a moment, turned it over, and then I put it back. I'm not sure why. They were my size. I had the money. I think I just wanted to be the sort of person who thinks about it first, who doesn't grab the thing the moment they see it. So I told myself I'd come back, and I walked out. You've probably done a version of this. Not the shoes, I don't mean the shoes. I mean the thing you saw and wanted and walked away from, telling yourself you'd decide later. There's a small, almost pleasant feeling in that. The leaving it behind, the keeping of the option. So walk with me a while. Because what happened to those shoes after I left them is, I think, something that has happened to you too, with something. And it's stranger than it sounds. I went home. It was an ordinary walk. The same streets I always took, the light going flat and grey in the late afternoon. Nothing about it worth remembering. A bus went past with its windows lit. Somewhere a shutter came down. I had my keys already in my hand by habit, the cold edge of them, 3 streets before I'd need them. None of it asked anything of me. And yet somewhere in that walk, the shoes came with me, not as a decision. I wasn't running the numbers, weighing it up, building a case for going back. It was quieter than that. The shoes were just there, at the edge of things. The way a song you heard that morning keeps surfacing without being summoned. I'd be thinking about something else entirely. What to make for dinner, whether I'd left a window open. And then there they'd be again. That warm white, that small sheen, sliding back in under the ordinary thoughts, as if they'd never left. This is the part I want to slow down on, because it's easy to miss. The shoes were not in my hands. I had walked away from them. And the moment I walked away, something began. Because the not having does something. The gap, the distance between me and the thing I'd left on the shelf, that gap isn't empty. It doesn't just sit there waiting to be closed. It starts to fill with something. There's a particular pull to a thing you've decided to leave, but haven't quite let go of. And the more steps I put between myself and the shop, the more present the shoes became, not less, as if the leaving were a kind of feeding. By the time I got home, the shoes I was thinking about were already, very slightly, not the same shoes I had held an hour before. Evening came. I had dinner, did whatever I did. The flat went quiet in the way it does at night, the small sounds getting smaller, and the shoes stayed. Still there at the edge, brighter now against the dark than they'd been against the shop. And by now they had begun to change. By the next morning, the shoes were perfect. I mean this almost literally. The version of them in my head, overnight, had become clearer and brighter and more beautiful than the actual shoes had been on the shelf. The white was whiter. The sheen was deeper. The strap sat at exactly the right angle. In my mind I could see them on, see how they'd look, and they looked extraordinary. Better, somehow, than any shoe I'd ever actually owned. It's worth sitting with how that night must have gone, because nothing about it felt like effort. I didn't lie there picturing the shoes on purpose. I slept. But somewhere underneath the sleeping, in that long unlit stretch where the day gets sorted and put away, the shoes were being handled, turned over, held up to a better light than the shop had. And whatever was doing that handling kept only the parts it liked: the curve, the gloss, the strap, and quietly let the rest go. Here is the strange thing. I hadn't seen them since the afternoon before. I had no new information. If anything, I had less. Memory fades. It loses detail. It should have made the shoes blurrier, vaguer, harder to hold. Instead, the opposite happened. They got sharper. They got better. Overnight, in the dark, with the real shoes sitting on a shelf across town in a closed shop, my mind had been working on them. Quietly editing, polishing. That's the word I keep coming back to. Editing. Because it wasn't just that I wanted them more, though I did. It's that the thing I wanted had been changed, improved. The mind had taken the absent shoes and done something to them that it could only do because they were absent. It had removed the small imperfections a real object always has, because there was no real object there to argue back. The real shoe couldn't interrupt. It couldn't sit in my hand and be merely fine, merely stiff, merely the color it actually was. It was across town, behind a locked door, and in its absence, the mind was free to make it as good as it liked. And it had. By morning, I wasn't going back for the shoes I'd seen. I was going back for the shoes I'd built. So why does this happen? Why does a thing get brighter the moment we stop being able to touch it? I think it has to do with distance. When something is far from you, not just far in space but out of reach, not yet yours, still on the other side of some gap, your mind doesn't hold the actual object. It can't. It holds an outline. And an outline is a beautiful thing because it's smooth. It's all shape and no grain. From a distance you see the clean white curve of the shoe and the idea of how it would feel to wear it. What you don't see is the slight stiffness of new leather, the way the strap might press, and the particular ordinary light of your own hallway, as opposed to the shop's flattering glow. Distance shows you the shape of a thing. Closeness shows you the texture. And the shape is always lovelier than the texture, because the shape is the part your mind gets to draw itself. There's something else too. When you want one thing, your mind puts a single small light on it and lets everything around it fall into the dark. The shoes, lit up, and not lit up. Your actual feet, your actual life, the actual mornings you'd wear them. All the unglamorous machinery of having a thing rather than wanting it. None of that is in the picture. The picture is just the shoe glowing in a kind of warm nowhere. It's not that the mind is lying. It's more generous than that, and more careless. It's just doing what it does with anything held at a distance, drawing the clean version, the one without the grain, and leaving out the rest of the room. And so the next morning, I went back. I went back quickly. That's the part I remember most clearly about that morning. The speed of it, the certainty, I was sure. Not only that I'd buy them, but that having them would feel the way wanting them had felt. That the glow would come with me out of the shop and into my actual life. The shelf was the same. The shoes were not there. My size was gone. Sold, presumably, between my leaving and my returning. To someone who saw them, liked them, and took them home. And is not, I'd guess, still thinking about it. So I searched. Someone was with me, and the two of us went through the shelves, the back room, the other shop down the road. And eventually we found a pair. Similar, maybe the same, white and glossy with that thin strap, my size this time. I couldn't have told you for certain whether it was the identical model or simply a close cousin. And here's the thing. By then, it didn't matter. By then, no real pair could have been the shoes I was looking for, because the shoes I was looking for had been made overnight, in my head, out of distance and dark. Whatever was on that shelf was only ever going to be leather and stitching. But I didn't know that yet. I carried the found pair to a seat, and I put them on, and the brightness drained out of them. It happened in the ordinary way these things happen. No drama, no sudden crash. Just a quiet deflation as the shoe went onto my foot and became simply a shoe. I felt the heel first, the small resistance as my foot went in, the leather not yet giving anywhere. The strap, when I fastened it, sat a finger's width from where I'd pictured it. It pressed, very slightly, across the top of my foot. A small, real pressure the imagined version had never had to account for. I stood. The shoe held my weight in its own particular way, a little stiff at the toe, and I looked down. And there it was, on a real foot, on the grey carpet of the shop, under a strip light that was just a strip light. The white was only white. Up close I could see the faint grain of the leather, a seam I hadn't noticed, the ordinary plainness of a thing that exists. Fine. Nice even, but ordinary. A real object, in a real room, on a real Tuesday. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to say the wrong thing about this moment. The shoes hadn't got worse. Nothing had been done to them. They were exactly as good as they had been on the shelf the day before. Probably the same shoes or near enough. They had not betrayed me. They had not failed some test. What had happened was simpler and stranger. The perfect version. The one my mind had drawn overnight, smooth, glowing, without grain, met the real one. And the real one couldn't match it. Of course it couldn't. Nothing could. The perfect version had no friction in it, precisely because it wasn't real. It had no strap that pressed, no stiff heel, no plain strip light. The moment a real shoe arrived, with all of that included, the comparison was lost before it began. I sat there for a moment with one shoe on, and I understood, dimly, that the thing I had wanted so much that morning had never actually been for sale. I didn't buy them. I'm fairly sure I didn't, though that part has gone soft in memory, which feels about right. The wanting is vivid, the resolution forgettable. What stayed with me is the shape of the whole thing, because once you've noticed it, you start to see it everywhere, and it has very little to do with shoes. There's a place you've always meant to go and never quite reached. In your head, it's perfect. The light, the streets, the version of yourself who'd be there. There's a person you saw once and never spoke to, who in memory has become more interesting, more exactly right than any person you actually know. There's a plan still in your head, unstarted, that is the best plan you've ever had, because it has not yet had to survive contact with a single real Tuesday. All of them brighter than they could ever be in the hand. All of them glowing the way the shoes glowed. Not because of what they are, but because of where they are. On the other side of a gap, held at a distance, where the mind is free to draw the clean version, the one without the grain. The brightness, it turns out, was never in the shoes. It was in the distance between me and the shoes. It lived in the wanting, and in the dark, and in the overnight editing. And wanting, by its nature, ends the moment you have the thing. You can't want what's already on your foot. I used to think there was something a little foolish in this, that the right response was to catch the mind in the act, to say, "Those aren't the real shoes. You've made them up. Stop it." I don't think that anymore, because the mind wasn't tricking me. It was doing something quieter and kinder than that. For one evening and one night, it gave me a perfect thing. For free, asking nothing. just for the pleasure of holding it. A white shoe with no grain in it. A small, flawless object that existed nowhere except in the warm distance of not yet having. And then, the way these things go, the morning came and the world got specific again, and the perfect version dissolved back into leather and stitching. But it was real while it lasted. Not as a shoe, as an experience. As that particular brightness you feel walking home from something you've left behind, building it up in the dark. That was real. I felt it. You felt it too about something. The shoe was never the point. The point was that for a little while, in the gap before the world got specific again, I got to hold something perfect. And then I walked on.